Done. The spring flowers were just beginning to bloom when Dr. Martinez called. I was in my antique shop, Morrison's Treasures, a Victorian house I'd converted 30 years ago with $300 in a dream. My hands were arranging white roses in a crystal vase when my phone rang. "Mrs. Morrison, I need you and your husband to come in immediately. The test results are back." The vase slipped. Water splashed across the mahogany counter. David had been tired for months. We'd blamed it on age. He was 68 after all. Men slow down. That's what I told myself every time I watched him fall asleep in his chair before the evening news ended. The drive to Dr. Martinez's office took 12 minutes. It felt like 12 hours. David sat beside me in the waiting room, his weathered hands folded in his lap. We'd been married for 42 years. I knew every line on his face, every gray hair, every freckle. I thought I knew everything about this man. I was wrong. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The words hung in the sterile air of Dr. Martinez's office. I watched my husband crumble his hands covering his face as the doctor continued speaking. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. The words blurred together like watercolors in rain. Then one phrase cut through everything else. "We're looking at approximately $250,000 for the full treatment protocol." David's hands dropped. His face had gone pale. Ellie, I can't put you through this." "Don't." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Don't you dare talk like that." Dr. Martinez excused himself to give us privacy. The moment the door clicked shut, David stood and walked to the window. His shoulders shook. "Maybe it's my time, Ellie. Maybe I should just let nature take its course." I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around him from behind. He'd lost weight. I could feel his ribs through his shirt. "We're going to fight this together," I said. "Do you hear me, David Morrison? We're going to fight." That night I sat at our kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. Our insurance would cover maybe 60% of the costs. The rest would have to come from somewhere else. I knew where. The antique shop was worth nearly $400,000. The building sat on prime real estate downtown, and the inventory alone pieces I'd collected over 3 decades was valued at $60,000. Our house was paid off, worth another $200,000 in the current market. Between the two properties, we could cover David's treatment and have enough left over to rent a small apartment while he recovered. I made the decision without telling him. The next morning, I called Janet, my realtor. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" Janet's voice was careful on the phone. "These are major assets. Once you sell, there's no going back." Through the kitchen window, I could see David in the backyard, staring at the garden we'd planted together 15 years ago. His shoulders were hunched. He looked so small. "I'm sure." The process took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of watching David grow weaker while I quietly dismantled our life. I sold the shop to a developer who planned to tear it down for condos. He didn't care about the history in those walls, the stories each piece of furniture held. He cared about square footage and profit margins. The house went to a young couple with 3 children who promised to take care of my rose garden. The wife had kind eyes. She cried when I showed her how to prune the bushes. "I'll take good care of them," she whispered. "I promise." I moved us into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. 1,200 square feet instead of 2,500. No garden, no history. Just beige walls and carpet that smelled like the previous tenant's dog. But we had the money for David's treatment. That's all that mattered. I became an expert in things I never wanted to know. How to give injections without causing bruises. Which foods wouldn't upset David's stomach after chemo. How to clean up when the nausea hit at 3 in the morning. How to smile and say it's okay when he apologized for the 100th time. Every morning at 7, I drove him to the cancer center. The route became so familiar I could drive it in my sleep. Left on Maple right, on 3rd Street for 2 miles left into the parking garage. Every afternoon I sat beside him while poison dripped into his veins. The chair beside his became my office, my dining room, my entire world. I learned to recognize the other regulars, Martha with the yellow headscarf, Tom, who always brought crossword puzzles, young Anita, who shouldn't have been there at age 32. We nodded at each other. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? Every evening I held David's head while he was sick. I monitored his medication schedule with military precision. 7 a.m. anti-nausea, 9 a.m. pain management, noon vitamins, 3 p.m. immune support, 8 p.m. sleep aid. I learned to cook foods that wouldn't hurt his mouth when the sores appeared. Mashed potatoes, scrambled eggs, lukewarm soup, everything soft, everything bland, everything measured. For 8 months, cancer became our entire world. But it worked. In November, Dr. Martinez used the word we'd been praying for. Remission, David cried. I cried. Dr. Martinez smiled for the first time since March and said, "You two beat it. You actually beat it." David looked better than he had in a year. His color returned. His appetite came back. He started talking about the future again. Maybe we could take a trip. Maybe we could get a small house with a garden again. Maybe. I thought we'd won. I was so naive. The conversation that shattered my world happened on a Wednesday evening in December. I was making David's favorite soup, chicken, and rice the way his mother used to make it. The smell filled our small apartment, almost making it feel like home. Almost. "Ellie, we need to talk." Something in his tone made my stomach drop, but I kept stirring the soup, watching the rice swirl in the broth. "What about... I've been thinking a lot during this whole ordeal. About life. About what I want. About us." I turned around. David was sitting at our small dining table, his hands folded, looking anywhere but at me. "I want a divorce." The spoon clattered to the floor. Broth splattered across the linoleum. "What yum? I know this is difficult. Difficult." The word came out as a laugh, a horrible, hollow sound. "David, what are you talking about? I've realized that I want to spend whatever time I have left being truly happy." "Haven't we been happy?" My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. David finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in 42 years of marriage. Indifference. "Ellie, you're a good woman, but we've been living like roommates for years. I want passion. I want to feel alive again." "Feel alive again?" I repeated. My hands gripped the counter. "David, I sold everything to save your life. I spent 8 months taking care of you. I gave up my business, my home, everything I built. I never asked you to do that." Those 6 words hit me like a physical blow. My legs went weak. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. "You never asked me. You're my husband. Of course I did it. Well, now I'm asking for my freedom." The apartment suddenly felt too small. The walls were closing in. I couldn't breathe. "There's someone else, isn't there?" David's silence was answer enough. My mind raced back through the past 8 months. The chemo sessions, the doctor's appointments, the nurses who rotated through the cancer center. "Who is she?" "Her name is Sarah." His voice was quiet. "She was one of my nurses during treatment." I remembered her. Pretty blonde, maybe 34, always smiling, always asking David how he was feeling, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes. I'd thought she was just being professional. "How long? Does it matter?" "How long, David?" He sighed. "Since July. July, right in the middle of his treatment. While I was selling my life's work to pay for his care, he was falling in love with another woman." "I want you out by the end of the month," he said, standing up. His chair scraped against the floor. "I'll give you 30 days to find somewhere else to live." "This is my apartment, too. I'm the one who rented it. My name is on the lease. Sarah will be moving in after the holidays. It would be awkward for all of us if you stayed." I stared at this man I'd loved for 42 years. This man I'd sacrificed everything to save. And I didn't recognize him. "Where am I supposed to go? I don't have any money. I spent everything on your treatment." David picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. He didn't look at me. "That's not my problem anymore, Eleanor." He walked out. The door clicked shut. I stood in our tiny kitchen soup still simmering on the stove and felt my entire world collapse. The next week was a nightmare. I called our son Nathan, thinking surely he would understand. Surely he would be outraged by his father's behavior. Nathan was 40 years old, a lawyer in Chicago. Successful. Rational. I'd raised him to be fair, to think critically, to do the right thing. "Mom, I think you need to accept that Dad has the right to be happy." I was sitting on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear. The words didn't make sense. Nathan, I gave up everything to save his life. And that was your choice. But you can't hold that over his head forever. I'm not holding anything over his head. I'm just trying to understand how you can support this. I heard him sigh. He sounded tired, annoyed. Look, Mom, you've always been dramatic. Dad told me how you've been guilt-tripping him about the money. Sarah makes him happy in a way you haven't for years. Maybe it's time to let him move on. My hands were shaking. He told you about Sarah? Of course he did. He's been miserable, Mom. Just give him a break. Nathan had taken his father's side. My son, the boy I'd nursed through chickenpox, the teenager I'd driven to debate tournaments at 6 a.m, the young man I'd helped through law school, had chosen his father's happiness over my survival. I hung up without saying goodbye. But there was still hope. I had one more lifeline. 25 years ago, I'd started Morrison & Associates with 2 other women, Victoria Chen and Patricia Foster. We'd built a consulting business helping small retailers with marketing and operations. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. When I opened the antique shop, I'd reduced my involvement to a silent partnership, 20% ownership. It provided a small but steady income stream, about $1,500 a month. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to rent a room somewhere. Enough to start over. Victoria called me 2 days after New Year's. Eleanor, Patricia, and I would like to meet with you. Can you come to the office tomorrow? The Morrison & Associates office was in a renovated warehouse downtown. High ceilings, exposed brick, the kind of trendy space that attracted young entrepreneurs. I'd helped design it 15 years ago. Now, walking through the glass doors, I felt like a stranger. Victoria and Patricia were waiting in the conference room. They didn't stand when I entered. Gretchen, thank you for coming. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. What's this about? Patricia leaned forward. We've been discussing your situation. Given everything you're going through personally, the divorce, the financial stress, we're concerned about your emotional state. My emotional state? I set my purse on the table. What does that have to do with the business? You missed 3 client meetings last month, Victoria said. I was dealing with my husband's cancer treatment and then a divorce. Of course I was distracted. Exactly our point. Patricia's voice was smooth, practiced. We think you need time to get your personal life sorted out. We're prepared to buy out your partnership stake. The room tilted. Buy me out? We're offering $25,000. Victoria slid a folder across the table. That's more than fair market value, given the current state of the business. I opened the folder. The numbers swam before my eyes. My 20% stake was worth at least $40,000. They knew it. I knew it. We'd done the valuation 6 months ago for insurance purposes. They were taking advantage of my situation. This is $15,000 under actual value. Victoria and Patricia exchanged a glance. The business has had some challenges recently, Patricia said. Revenue is down. We need capital to restructure. This is actually quite generous. She was lying. I could see it in the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. But what choice did I have? I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight them. I needed money now, not months from now after a legal battle. I signed the papers. $25,000 for 25 years of work. By February 1st, I had lost everything. My husband, my son's respect, my business partnership, my home, my life savings. I was 65 years old with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. The homeless shelter on Maple Street became my temporary address. It's just until you get back on your feet, the social worker assured me, her smile kind but overworked. Her name was Jennifer. She looked about 30. Most people don't stay long. She handed me a list of rules. No alcohol, no drugs, lights out at 10 p.m. Everyone must attend the 8 a.m. job readiness workshop on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You'll be in the women's dormitory, bed 23. The dormitory held 30 beds in 3 rows, narrow cots with thin mattresses and scratchy wool blankets. A mix of women, young, old, black, white, Latina, Asian, all of us temporary residents of this way station between one life and whatever came next. The woman in bed 22 was named Maria. She was 35 with 2 children in foster care and a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend who'd put her in the hospital twice. The woman in bed 24 was Ruth. 72 years old, a retired teacher whose pension hadn't been enough when her rent doubled. She'd lived in her car for 3 months before the shelter. We didn't talk much that first night. What was there to say? I lay on my cot listening to the sounds of 30 women trying to sleep. Someone was crying quietly. Someone else was snoring. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows. I pulled my thin blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes. This couldn't be my life. This couldn't be how the story ended. But it was. The next 2 weeks were an education. I learned which bathroom stalls had the most water pressure. I learned to fold my clothes so they'd fit in the plastic storage bin under my bed. I learned that the coffee was better if you added a pinch of salt. I learned to disappear into myself when the woman in bed 18 started screaming about invisible enemies at 3 in the morning. I learned that dignity was something you had to fight for every single day. Most importantly, I learned that I wasn't special. I wasn't unique. The shelter was full of women who had worked hard, played by the rules, and still ended up here. Ruth had been a teacher for 40 years. Maria had worked 2 jobs before her boyfriend broke her arm, and she lost both of them. Lisa in bed 7 was a nurse who'd gotten addicted to pain medication after a car accident. We all had stories. We all had reasons. And none of those stories or reasons mattered to the world outside the shelter doors. I started looking for work. At 65, most employers saw me as a liability rather than an asset. "We'll be in touch," they said with polite smiles that meant nothing. I went to 7 interviews in 2 weeks, 7 rejections delivered with varying degrees of courtesy. "We're looking for someone with more recent experience in digital marketing. We need someone who can commit long-term. Translation, you're too old and might retire soon. Your qualifications are impressive, but we're going with a younger candidate who's more familiar with current technologies." I spent my afternoons in the public library trying to teach myself LinkedIn and Instagram and all the tools that hadn't existed when I'd built my business. The librarian, a kind woman named Carol, helped me set up email accounts and navigate social media. "You're doing great," she encouraged. "These things just take time." But time was something I didn't have. By the 3rd week of February, I had $7.34 to my name. $7.34 between me and absolute destitution. The weather forecast had been ominous all week. Significant weather event, the meteorologists called it. The kind of storm that could knock out power for days and turn streets into rivers. By noon on Friday, the shelter staff were making preparations, checking generators, stocking extra food, filling bathtubs with water in case the pipes froze. "All residents should plan to remain inside tonight," Mrs. Chen, the day manager, announced. "This storm is going to be dangerous." But at 4:30 that afternoon, I realized I'd made a critical mistake. In my distraction over a job interview that morning, another rejection delivered with exceptional politeness, I'd forgotten to take my blood pressure medication. Without it, I risked a stroke or heart attack. The pills were sitting in my bag upstairs, but I needed food to take them safely. Dinner wouldn't be served until 6 o'clock. I counted my money again. $7.34. Enough for a small sandwich and maybe a carton of milk from the corner store 3 blocks away. The wind was already picking up when I stepped outside. Dark clouds churned overhead and the first fat raindrops were beginning to fall. I pulled my thin jacket tighter, the only coat I had left, and hurried down the street. The corner store was nearly empty except for the elderly clerk and a man buying cigarettes. I grabbed a pre-made turkey sandwich and a small carton of milk, calculating the exact cost in my head. $4.67. That would leave me with $2.67 for tomorrow. As I paid, the clerk glanced outside nervously. "Storm's coming fast. You should get home quick." Home. Such a simple word. Such a painful concept. I nodded and tucked my purchases into my jacket. The walk back to the shelter would take about 15 minutes if I hurried. I never made it. Halfway there, the sky opened up. Not the gentle rain that had been threatening all day, but a torrential downpour that soaked through my jacket in seconds. The wind turned vicious whipping debris down the street and making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I ducked into a doorway to wait it out, but the storm only got worse. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by thunder so loud it made my teeth ache. This wasn't a storm that would pass in a few minutes. This was the kind of weather that could kill you if you weren't careful. That's when I heard it. A sound that cut through the howling wind and driving rain. Crying. Not the wailing of the storm, but human crying. A child crying. I peered out into the rain, trying to locate the source. There, huddled behind a row of garbage cans in the alley beside a closed restaurant, was a small figure, A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, soaked to the skin and shivering violently. I didn't think. I ran. "Honey!" I called out, my voice barely audible over the storm. "Honey, what are you doing out here?" The child looked up at me with enormous brown eyes filled with terror. She was small for her age, with tangled dark hair plastered to her head, and clothes that had once been expensive but were now torn and muddy. "I'm lost," she whispered, teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. "I can't find my daddy." "Oh, sweetheart." I knelt beside her, not caring that the water from the alley immediately soaked through my pants. "How long have you been out here?" Since this morning, I think. Maybe yesterday. I don't know." My heart broke. This tiny thing had been alone in the storm for hours, maybe longer. "What's your name?" "Sophie. Sophie Elizabeth." "Well, Sophie Elizabeth, I'm Eleanor, and we need to get you somewhere safe right now." But as I looked around, I realized our options were limited. The restaurant behind us was closed, its metal security gate pulled down tight. The other buildings on this block were mostly offices, equally shuttered for the evening. Then I remembered the 24-hour convenience store we'd passed a few blocks back. It wasn't ideal, but it would be warm and dry. "Can you walk?" I asked Sophie. She nodded, though I could see she was exhausted and probably in mild shock. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around her small shoulders, even though it left me in just a thin sweater. "Hold on to me," I told her. "Don't let go no matter what." To be continued in Part 2. What would you do if you found a child alone in a storm? Would you risk everything to help them? Comment below and let me know. And stay tuned for Part 2, where Sophie's father appears and Eleanor's life changes forever. The 3 blocks to the convenience store felt like 3 miles. The wind kept trying to knock us down, and the rain came in sheets so thick we could barely see. I kept one arm around Sophie and used the other to guide us along storefronts and parked cars. My sweater was soaked through within minutes, but Sophie's small hand gripped mine like a lifeline. "Almost there, sweetheart," I kept saying. "Just a little farther." By the time we stumbled through the store's doors, we were both soaked and shaking. The clerk, a different one from earlier, looked up from his magazine with concern. He was younger than the previous clerk, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a name tag that read Danny. "Jesus, lady, you shouldn't be out in this with a kid." "I know." My voice was shaking as badly as my hands. "We got caught in it." The store was wonderfully warm. Fluorescent lights that seemed impossibly bright after the dark storm outside. The heating system hummed softly, and I could have cried from the relief of being somewhere dry. Sophie stayed pressed against my side, her small hand gripping my soaked sweater. I looked around the store, calculating what we needed. I had $2.67 left after buying the sandwich and milk. Sophie needed dry clothes, or at least something to help warm her up. She needed food. She probably needed medical attention, but that would have to wait until the storm passed. In the clothing section, a small display near the back, I found the cheapest options. A child's t-shirt with a cartoon character for $3.99. A small package of socks for $2.50. Both were too expensive for my budget, but I couldn't leave this child in wet clothes. That's when I remembered. 3 weeks ago, when I'd first arrived at the shelter, I'd hidden a $20 bill in the lining of my purse. My emergency fund. Money I'd sworn to save for a true emergency. Looking at Sophie blue-lipped and shivering, I knew this qualified. I pulled out the 20 and approached the counter with the t-shirt, socks, a small bag of cookies, and a bottle of water. Danny rang everything up. $9.47. I handed him the 20. He gave me back $10.53. Combined with my remaining $2.67, I now had $13.20. More than I'd had all day. "Is there a bathroom we can use?" I asked. Danny pointed toward the back. "Through that door. Take your time." The bathroom was small but clean. I helped Sophie out of her wet clothes, wringing them out over the sink. Her little body was covered in goosebumps, and I could see bruises on her arms that made my stomach turn cold. "Sophie, honey, how did you get those bruises?" She looked down at her arms like she'd forgotten they were there. "The men grabbed me when I tried to run away." My blood went cold. "What men?" "I'll tell you later," she whispered. "Can I put on the dry shirt now I'm really cold?" I helped her into the new t-shirt and socks. Her wet clothes I couldn't do much about, but at least her outer layer was dry and warm now. I used paper towels to dry her hair as much as possible, working gently through the tangles. Better, I asked. She nodded. For the first time since I'd found her, she smiled slightly. Thank you, Miss Eleanor. You can call me Eleanor. Thank you, Miss Eleanor. We settled in a corner of the store with the cookies and water. Sophie ate like she hadn't seen food in days, which made me wonder exactly how long she'd been missing. Sophie, where do you live? I asked gently. In a big house, she said around a mouthful of cookie. With lots of windows and a big yard. There are horses in the stables behind the house. Do you remember your address? She shook her head. Daddy says I'm not supposed to tell strangers where I live, for safety. Smart girl and smart father, but it made finding her family more complicated. What about your daddy's name? His full name, James, she said immediately. James William Blackwood. The name meant nothing to me, but I filed it away. Does your daddy have a phone number you remember? Again, she shook her head. I'm not supposed to remember numbers either, but Daddy will find me. He always finds me when I'm lost. I'm sure he's looking for you right now, sweetheart. Can you tell me what happened? How did you get lost? Sophie's face clouded. She set down her cookie. I was at school. My school has a big playground with swings and a slide. I was waiting for my driver. His name is Mr. Peterson, and he's really nice and always brings me peppermints. She paused, and I waited, not wanting to push her. But these men came instead. 2 of them. They said they knew my daddy. They said Daddy sent them to pick me up because Mr. Peterson was sick. My heart started pounding. Did you know these men? No. And they didn't smell right. One of them smelled like cigarettes, and the other one smelled mean. Smelled mean? Like anger, Sophie said seriously. Like when people are mad but trying to pretend they're not. I didn't want to go with them, but my teacher, Mrs. Roberts, she checked a list and said it was okay. So you went with them? Sophie nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. They took me to a building, an old building that smelled bad. They locked me in a room and said I had to stay there until my daddy did what they wanted. I pulled her close, feeling her small body trembling. How long were you there? I don't know. A long time. They brought me food sometimes, but I was so scared I couldn't eat much. They kept saying my daddy had to give them something important, and then they'd let me go home. What did they want from your daddy? I don't know. They talked about computers and numbers and secrets, but Daddy always says he can't talk about his work because it's classified. Classified. That word suggested military or government connections. This wasn't just a lost child. This was something much more serious. Sophie, how did you get away? Her face brightened slightly. They left me alone for a few minutes. The rope they tied wasn't very tight. I think they didn't know how to tie it right. And there was a loose board in the wall. I'm small, so I squeezed through and ran. I looked at this 8-year-old girl with new respect. She'd been kidnapped by professionals and had managed to escape on her own. When did you escape? I think maybe 3 days ago, or 4. I've been hiding since then, sleeping in different places. I found some food in trash cans behind restaurants. She said this matter-of-factly like it was a normal thing for a child to do. Sophie, we need to call the police. They can help find your daddy. Her reaction was immediate and terrifying. She grabbed my arm with both hands, her eyes wide with panic. No police. The men said if I called the police, they'd hurt my daddy. They said they'd know if I called and they'd make sure Daddy never came home. Sweetheart, the police are the good guys. They help find lost children. No. Tears were streaming down her face now. Please don't call them. Please, I can't let them hurt my daddy. He's all I have left. Mommy's gone, and if something happens to Daddy... She was sobbing now, her small body shaking. I held her, feeling utterly helpless. Whatever had happened to her, whatever those men had told her, she was genuinely terrified of involving the authorities. The storm raged on outside. Through the store windows, I could see trees bending nearly horizontal in the wind. Power lines sparked and swayed dangerously. This was no ordinary storm. Danny the clerk came over to check on us. Storm's getting worse. National Weather Service is saying it might be the worst we've had in 20 years. You two planning to try to get somewhere, or you want to wait it out here? I looked at Sophie, then at the apocalyptic scene outside. Can we stay here for a while? Sure, he shrugged. I'm here all night anyway. Storm like this, nobody's coming in to shop. You might as well stay warm. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than he could possibly know. You want some hot chocolate? He asked Sophie. We got one of those machines. It's not great, but it's warm. Sophie looked at me for permission. I nodded, and Danny brought her a cup of hot chocolate that was probably 90% sugar and 10% chocolate flavoring. She didn't care. She wrapped her hands around the cup and sipped it like it was the finest thing she'd ever tasted. We spent the next 4 hours in that convenience store. Danny stopped charging me for the hot chocolate after the second cup. He also accidentally left a bag of pretzels near us and a small package sandwich that was about to expire anyway. Around midnight, the worst of the weather finally moved through. The rain diminished to a steady drizzle, and the wind died down enough that we could hear ourselves think. "We should try to find a safe place for you to sleep," I told Sophie. "Tomorrow we'll figure out how to find your daddy, but right now, you need rest." "Where can we go?" she asked. Good question. I couldn't bring her to the shelter. They had strict policies about children unaccompanied minors had to be reported to Child Protective Services immediately. That would mean police involvement, which would terrify Sophie and potentially put her father in danger if the kidnappers were watching. Hotels were out of the question with my $13.20. "I know a place," Sophie said quietly. "There's a park not far from here. It has a gazebo with a roof. I slept there last night. It's dry." The idea of spending the night in a park with a child made my stomach turn. But what choice did we have? As we prepared to leave the store, Danny called out to us. "Hey, wait." He walked over with a plastic bag. "Take these." Inside were granola bars, bottled water, and a small fleece blanket from the store's camping section. "I can't pay for all this," I told him. "Didn't ask you to." He looked at Sophie and something in his expression softened. "Kid needs to eat, and it's going to be cold tonight." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you. Really." He shrugged, embarrassed. "Just take care of her, okay?" Outside, the air was clean and cool after the storm. Debris littered the streets. Tree branches scattered garbage, broken glass. But the worst had passed. Sophie led me through several blocks to a small neighborhood park. The gazebo she'd mentioned was old but sturdy, with a solid roof and partial walls that would provide some protection from the wind. I spread out the blanket Danny had given us, and we huddled together. Sophie curled up against my side like a small cat seeking warmth. "Miss Eleanor," she said softly in the darkness. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you my guardian angel?" The question caught me off guard. Here I was, a homeless woman with $13 to my name, and this precious child saw me as her protector. "I'm just someone who cares about you," I said. "Daddy always says that guardian angels come when you need them most. When Mommy died, he said she became my guardian angel in heaven, and now you found me in the storm." I held her tighter. "Well, then maybe I am." "I knew it," Sophie murmured, her voice getting sleepy. "I prayed for help, and you came." As her breathing evened out in sleep, I stared up at the gazebo ceiling and wondered what tomorrow would bring. I had no idea that in less than 72 hours, my entire life would change in ways I could never have imagined. Day 1 dawned cold and gray. Sophie woke before me, sitting up and looking around with the wariness of a small animal checking for predators. When she saw me, she relaxed slightly. "Good morning," I said, my back aching from sleeping on the hard gazebo floor. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor. Are we going to find my daddy today?" "We're going to try, sweetheart. But first we need to get you some breakfast." We made our way back to the convenience store. Danny was still there, finishing his overnight shift. His eyes were tired, but he smiled when he saw us. "You two made it through okay?" "We did, thanks to you." I gestured to the blanket I'd carried with us. "Keep it," he said. "Look, I'm about to go off shift, but my replacement, Carlos, he's cool. I told him about you two. You can use the bathroom here anytime, okay? And..." He slid a $10 bill across the counter. "For the kid. Get her a real breakfast." I tried to refuse, but he wouldn't take it back. "Just pay it forward someday," he said. With Danny's $10 and my remaining $13.20, I had $23.20. Enough for a couple of days if we were careful. That first day, I learned how to be invisible. We spent the morning at the park, sitting on a bench and watching people. Sophie told me stories about her life fragments that painted a picture of wealth and privilege I could barely imagine. "We have a pool shaped like a butterfly," she said, "and a library with a ladder that slides. Daddy lets me pick out 5 books every week, and we read them together before bed." "That sounds wonderful." When Mommy was alive, we used to have tea parties in the garden. She had this special tea set from England with roses painted on it. After she died, Daddy put it away. He said it made him too sad to look at it. How did your mommy die, sweetheart? Sophie's face fell. Car accident. 3 years ago. She was driving home from a charity thing and a truck hit her car. Daddy says she didn't feel any pain, but I don't know if that's true or if he just tells me that so I won't be scared. My heart broke for this child who'd lost her mother and was now separated from her father. In the afternoon, we went to the public library. The same librarian who'd been helping me with my job search, Carol, was working. She noticed Sophie immediately. Eleanor, who's this? This is Sophie. She's staying with me for a few days. Carol's eyes were sharp. She knew I was homeless. She knew this situation wasn't normal, but she also saw the fear in Sophie's face and made a decision. Well, Sophie, do you like to read? Sophie nodded enthusiastically. Come with me. I'll show you our children's section. While Sophie was distracted by books, Carol pulled me aside. Eleanor, what's going on? That child is terrified. I told her an abbreviated version, left out the kidnapping, just said Sophie was lost and scared, and I was trying to help her find her father without involving authorities that might frighten her more. Carol studied my face for a long moment. You have a good heart, but be careful. If something happens to that child while she's in your care... I know, but I can't just abandon her. Carol sighed. No, I don't suppose you can. Look, the library is open until 8 tonight. You two can stay here as long as you want. It's warm, it's safe, and there are bathrooms. Okay? We spent the rest of the day in the library. Sophie read picture books while I tried to figure out our next move. I couldn't call the police. I didn't know how to contact James Blackwood without more information. All I could do was keep Sophie safe and hope her father was looking for her. Day 2 started with a complication. We were at the convenience store now, a regular stop in our routine, when Sophie suddenly grabbed my arm. Miss Eleanor, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. That car, it's been there before. I followed her gaze to a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, and it had been there for about 20 minutes. Are you sure? Sophie nodded, pressing closer to me. Yesterday when we were at the library, and the day before near the gazebo. It's the same car. My heart started pounding. If someone was watching us, if the kidnappers had found Sophie again, we were in serious danger. A 65-year-old woman and a small child were no match for professional criminals. We're going to walk away very calmly, I told her quietly. Just like we're going somewhere normal. Don't look back at the car. We gathered our few belongings and started walking deeper into the commercial district, toward the shopping center 6 blocks away. Lots of people, security cameras, safety. Behind us, I heard a car door slam. They're following us, Sophie whimpered. I picked up our pace, my mind racing. The shopping center was still 4 blocks away. Too far. Excuse me. The voice behind us was male authoritative. I didn't turn around. Ma'am, please stop. I grabbed Sophie's hand and started running. She kept up surprisingly well for such a small child, but I could hear footsteps gaining on us. My lungs were burning. My legs felt like lead. We're not going to hurt you. That's what they all said. We made it maybe 2 blocks before a second black car appeared at the intersection ahead of us. Then a third came from our left. We were surrounded. Men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles. Not the rough criminals I'd expected, but professionals. Expensive clothes, earpieces, the kind of bearing that suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds. I pulled Sophie behind me, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Stay back, I shouted. I've called the police. It was a lie, but maybe they'd believe it. One of the men older than the others with graying hair and kind eyes stepped forward with his hands visible and empty. Ma'am, my name is Agent Michael Torres. We're not here to harm anyone. We're looking for Sophie Blackwood. Sophie's grip on my hand tightened painfully. Is that your last name, sweetheart? I asked quietly, not taking my eyes off the men. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. But they might be lying. The bad men could be pretending. Agent Torres seemed to understand her fear. He crouched down, making himself less threatening. Sophie, honey, do you remember the song your daddy used to sing to you when you couldn't sleep? The one about the mockingbird. Sophie's eyes widened. How? How do you know that? Because your daddy told me. He's been looking for you for 6 days, sweetheart. He's very worried. Daddy's really looking for me. He is, and he's right here. Torres spoke into his earpiece, and moments later the most expensive car I'd ever seen pulled up to the curb. Not just expensive extraordinary, a Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years. The man who stepped out took my breath away. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair silvered at the temples. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything about him screamed power and wealth. But when he saw Sophie, all of that fell away. Sophie. His voice broke on her name. Daddy. She broke away from me and ran to him, launching herself into his arms. He caught her and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, his face buried in her hair as his shoulders shook with emotion. Thank God, he whispered. Thank God you're safe. I stood there watching this reunion, suddenly acutely aware of my own appearance. My hair unwashed for 3 days. My clothes the same ones I'd been wearing since the storm. I probably smelled like the laundromat where we'd spent last night. After several minutes, the man Sophie's father gently set her down, but kept one hand on her shoulder. Then he looked at me. You're the woman who's been taking care of my daughter. It wasn't a question. His eyes were studying me intently, blue-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. Yes, I found her during the storm. She was scared and alone. He stepped closer and I instinctively took a step back. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming intensity of his presence. Agent Torres told me what his team observed. You've been protecting her for 3 days, feeding her, keeping her safe, staying with her. I nodded, not sure what else to say. What's your name? Eleanor. Eleanor Morrison. Eleanor Morrison. He repeated it like he was memorizing it. My name is James William Blackwood, and I owe you a debt I can never repay. Jan, I'd like you to come with us. James Blackwood's words hung in the air between us. Behind him, Sophie was being checked over by what appeared to be a medical professional who'd emerged from one of the black SUVs. That's not necessary, I said. Sophie's safe now. That's all that matters. It is necessary. His tone was firm but not unkind. My daughter doesn't want to let you out of her sight, and frankly neither do I, at least until I can properly thank you for what you've done. Sophie looked up from the medical examination. Please, Miss Eleanor, don't leave me. Sweetheart, you're with your daddy now. You're safe. But I want you to come too. Please. I looked at this child I'd known for only 3 days, but had come to care about deeply. Then I looked at her father, whose expression was unreadable. Just for a little while, James said. Until Sophie feels settled. Then if you want to leave, you're free to go. Agent Torres stepped closer. Ma'am, there's also a security concern. You've been seen with Sophie. There are photographs of you together taken by the kidnapper's associates before they were arrested. As far as anyone watching knows, you're important to the Blackwood family now. That could make you a target. The words sent a chill through me. I hadn't thought about that. I'd been so focused on keeping Sophie safe that I hadn't considered I might have put myself in danger. So what are you suggesting? That leaving now and trying to go back to your previous life could be extremely dangerous, Torres said. For your own safety, we need to keep you under protection until we're certain the threat has been neutralized. For how long? 24 hours, James said. Give me 24 hours to debrief Sophie, deal with the security situation, and figure out how to properly thank you. Then if you want to leave, you're free to go. Sophie was still holding my hand, looking up at me with those enormous brown eyes. Please, Miss Eleanor, I'm scared without you. And that decided it. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Leather seats softer than most beds. Climate control that made the air feel like a gentle spring breeze. Enough space that Sophie and I could sit comfortably while James sat across from us. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere safe, James replied, but he was looking at Sophie, not me. Baby girl, I need you to tell me everything that happened, starting with the day you disappeared. Sophie launched into her story. As she talked, I began to understand the scope of what had occurred. She'd been taken from Brightwood Academy, apparently a prestigious private school, by 2 men claiming to be friends of her father. The school had a security protocol, but somehow these men had gotten through it. They had paperwork, Sophie explained. Mrs. Roberts checked the list and their IDs matched. She thought it was okay. James's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. It's not your fault, sweetheart. Or Mrs. Roberts's. These men were professionals. They knew how to fool people. The kidnappers had held Sophie in an abandoned warehouse for 2 days, waiting for James to comply with their demands. What did they want from you? I asked. James's expression darkened. Access to certain government contracts. Information about defense systems my company is developing. Technology that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the right buyers or the wrong ones. And you refused? I couldn't give them what they wanted even if I'd wanted to. The information they were after doesn't exist in the way they thought it did. Our security protocols are compartmentalized. No single person has access to complete systems. So they just kept Sophie. They were waiting for me to find a way, James said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. What they didn't count on was my daughter being resourceful enough to escape. I looked at Sophie with new respect. How did you get away, sweetheart? The rope wasn't tied very tight, Sophie said matter-of-factly. And there was a loose board in the wall. I'm small, so I squeezed through and ran. I ran for a long time until I didn't know where I was anymore. James closed his eyes briefly, and I could see the pain on his face as he imagined his daughter in that situation. The car turned through massive iron gates, and I got my first glimpse of the Blackwood estate. Calling it a house would be like calling the ocean a pond. The mansion sprawled across what had to be at least 20 acres. Manicured gardens with fountains and sculptures. Outbuildings that were larger than most people's homes. And the main residence, a stone structure that looked like something from a European fairy tale, all graceful arches and elegant towers. This is where you live. The words came out before I could stop them. Sophie nodded like it was perfectly normal. Do you want to see my room? It has a balcony that looks out over the stables. As we pulled up to the front entrance, staff members emerged to greet us. Not just a butler or housekeeper, but what appeared to be a small army of people whose job was to take care of the Blackwood family. An older woman with kind eyes and graying brown hair stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, thank God. We've been so worried. Thank you, Elizabeth. James helped Sophie out of the car, then offered me his hand. I hesitated before taking it, acutely aware of the contrast between his manicured fingers and my own worn hands. Mrs. Morrison, he said as we walked toward the entrance. Before we go inside, I need you to understand something. What happened to Sophie, what you did for her, it changes things. I don't know exactly how yet, but it does. I wasn't sure what he meant, but something in his tone made me think my 24 hours at the Blackwood estate were going to be far more complicated than I'd anticipated. The guest suite James assigned me was larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with David. The bedroom alone was bigger than most bedrooms, with a 4-poster bed, antique furniture, and windows that overlooked the gardens. The bathroom was marble and gold, with a shower that had more buttons than a spacecraft control panel. I've left some clothes for you on the bed, Elizabeth said. She was the house manager, the woman who'd greeted us at the entrance. They should fit reasonably well. Mr. Blackwood asked me to ensure you have everything you might need. This is too much, I protested. I'm only staying for 24 hours. Elizabeth's smile was kind but knowing. Of course, dear. But while you're here, you should be comfortable. Dinner will be served at 7. I'll come collect you at 6:45. After she left, I stood in the middle of the suite, feeling completely out of place. The clothes laid out on the bed were beautiful, a soft cashmere sweater and pale blue well-tailored slacks and undergarments that still had price tags attached. Even the shoes were there, comfortable flats and exactly my size. How had they known my measurements? I found out later that James had sent someone to buy clothes in various sizes while we were driving to the estate. The efficiency was both impressive and slightly unsettling. The shower was a revelation. Hot water from multiple angles, water pressure that actually worked, soap that smelled like lavender instead of industrial cleaner. I stood under the spray for 20 minutes, washing away 3 days of living on the streets. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that was softer than most blankets, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked different. Cleaner, obviously, but also smaller somehow. Like the dirt and grime had been hiding how much weight I'd lost, how tired I really looked. I was 65 years old, and I looked every day of it. Dinner was served in what Elizabeth called the family dining room, which was apparently smaller than the formal dining room but still larger than most restaurants. Sophie had been bathed and changed into clean-clothes pink pajamas with stars on them. She looked more like a child and less like a small survivor, but she refused to sit in her usual seat, insisting on sitting next to me instead. James sat across from us, still in his suit, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but there was a peace in his expression that hadn't been there before. "How are you feeling, baby girl?" he asked Sophie. "Good. Miss Eleanor helped me take a bath. She's really good at getting tangles out of hair without pulling." James's eyes met mine. "I'm grateful." Dinner was simple by estate standards. I imagined roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. But after 3 days of convenience store food and whatever Sophie and I could scrounge, it tasted like heaven. Sophie talked non-stop, telling her father about our adventures, in a way that made them sound almost fun rather than terrifying. The convenience store clerk who gave us hot chocolate, the library with all the books, the gazebo where we slept. "Miss Eleanor kept me safe the whole time," Sophie said. "Even when she was cold, she gave me her jacket. Even when she was hungry, she made sure I ate first." James was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Is that true?" "Any decent person would have done the same," I said. "No." His voice was firm. "Most people would have called the authorities immediately and gone on with their lives. You made yourself responsible for a stranger's child. You protected her when you had nothing to give. That's not common decency, Mrs. Morrison. That's extraordinary." I didn't know what to say to that. After dinner, Sophie asked if I would help her get ready for bed. James nodded his approval, and I followed Sophie up the grand staircase to her bedroom. Her room was exactly as she'd described it, enormous, with a canopy bed, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and French doors that opened onto a balcony. But it was also clearly a child's room, filled with books and stuffed animals and drawings taped to the walls. "This is my favorite," Sophie said, showing me a drawing of 3 stick figures. "That's Mommy, that's Daddy, and that's me. I drew it before Mommy died. It's beautiful. Do you think Mommy would be proud of me for being brave when the bad men took me?" I pulled her into a hug. "I think your Mommy would be so proud of you she'd burst. You were incredibly brave, Sophie." "Will you stay with me until I fall asleep? I keep having bad dreams about the warehouse." "Of course I will." I tucked her into bed and sat beside her, holding her hand. She fell asleep within minutes, exhausted from everything she'd been through. I was about to leave when James appeared in the doorway. "She's asleep," I whispered. He nodded, walking over to the bed. He looked down at his daughter with such love and pain that it made my heart ache. "I almost lost her," he said quietly. 6 days of not knowing if she was alive or dead. 6 days of imagining the worst. And all that time she was surviving on the streets because she was too scared to ask for help. She's safe now. Because of you. He looked up at me. "Agent Torres told me everything his team observed. You spent your last money buying her dry clothes and food. You slept outside with her. You protected her from people you thought might hurt her, even though you're—" He stopped. "Even though I'm what an old woman, homeless, helpless. I was going to say, even though you were in a vulnerable position yourself." His voice was gentle. "Eleanor, may I call you Eleanor?" I nodded. "I had my team run a background check. I know about the divorce. I know about your husband's cancer and how you sold everything to save him. I know about your son's reaction, your business partners buying you out. I know how you ended up at the shelter." Heat flooded my face. The idea of strangers investigating my personal life, learning about my failures and humiliations, made me feel exposed and vulnerable. "You had no right." "I had every right," James interrupted smoothly. "A stranger spent 3 days caring for my daughter in circumstances that could have been dangerous for both of them. I needed to know who you are." "And what did you conclude?" "That you're exactly who you appeared to be. A woman who has been dealt a series of terrible hands, but who still chose to help a frightened child with the last money she had." He paused. "Eleanor, I want to make you an offer." James led me to his study, a room of dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and furniture that looked handcrafted by masters. "Please sit." I settled into a chair that was more comfortable than it looked. "What kind of offer?" "I need someone to help with Sophie. Someone she trusts. Someone who understands what she's been through." He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I travel frequently for business, sometimes for weeks at a time. Sophie has tutors and staff, but what she doesn't have is someone who genuinely cares about her well-being above everything else. She has you. When I'm here, yes, but I'm not here enough. There was pain in his voice. What happened this week has made me realize that Sophie needs more stability in her life, more consistency, someone who will always be there. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm offering you a position as Sophie's family life manager. Not a nanny, she's too old for that. But someone who would be responsible for her emotional well-being, her daily routine, her education, coordination. Someone who would live here and be part of her daily life. I stared at him. You want me to move in here? The position comes with a salary of $150,000 per year, plus complete benefits, health insurance, dental vision. Housing and meals are included, of course, plus a signing bonus of $30,000 to help you get back on your feet. $150,000. I tried to process that number. It was more money than I'd ever made in my life. This is insane, I said quietly. You don't know me. You don't know if I'm qualified to take care of a child. I know you spent 3 days protecting her when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I know you gave her your last $20 when you were homeless yourself. I know she feels safe with you in a way she hasn't with anyone since her mother died. Her mother. I seized on that. James, I can't replace Sophie's mother. I'm not asking you to replace anyone. Rebecca has been gone for 3 years and no one could ever take her place. But Sophie needs someone who cares about her as a person, not as a job. Someone who sees her not just my money or my position. Why me? You could hire anyone. Someone with credentials, experience with wealthy families' references. Sophie doesn't trust easily, James said. She's been through too much, losing her mother, being kidnapped, surviving on the streets. But she trusts you. That's worth more than any credentials. I thought about Sophie's small hand in mine during the storm, the way she'd curled up against me in the gazebo, how she'd called me her guardian angel. I need time to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. But I should mention Agent Torres believes you may still be at risk. The kidnapping ring had multiple members. Most have been arrested, but not all. Anyone who saw you with Sophie might assume you're important to our family. That makes you a potential target or bargaining chip. The implication was clear. Staying here wasn't just a job offer. It was protection. How long would I need to stay for safety? At least a few weeks, maybe longer. But Eleanor, I'm not offering you this position out of pity or obligation. I'm offering it because I think you're the right person for it. Because Sophie needs you. And, he paused, because I think maybe you need us too. Before I could respond, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Blackwood, but there's a situation at the front gate. James frowned. What kind of situation? A man claiming to be Mrs. Morrison's husband. He's quite insistent about seeing her. My stomach dropped. David. You don't have to see him, James said immediately. Security can remove him from the property. But I was already standing. No, I'll talk to him. I need to know what he wants. James's expression hardened. Then I'm coming with you. The front gate was a quarter-mile from the main house, but we could hear David's voice even from that distance. He was shouting at the security guard, demanding to be let in, threatening to call the police. As our car approached, I could see him clearly for the first time since the divorce. He looked older, thinner. There was something desperate about his posture that I'd never seen before. The moment he saw me, his whole demeanor changed. Ellie, he rushed toward the car as I got out. Thank God I found you. What are you doing here, David? How did you even know where I was? It doesn't matter. I've been looking everywhere for you. He reached for my hands, but I stepped back. Ellie, I've made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. What are you talking about? Sarah, the divorce, all of it. I was crazy, Ellie. The cancer, the treatment, it affected my judgment. I wasn't thinking clearly. I became aware of James standing slightly behind me and of the security personnel positioned discreetly around us. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to have an audience. You seemed pretty clear when you asked for a divorce, I said. I was scared. David continued, his voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. Scared of dying. Scared of being a burden. I thought if I pushed you away, it would be easier for everyone. By having an affair. David had the grace to look ashamed. That was a mistake. A huge mistake. Sarah, She took advantage of me when I was vulnerable. Took advantage? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. David, you left me homeless. You threw away 42 years of marriage for a woman young enough to be your daughter. I know. His voice cracked. And I've regretted it every single day since. Sarah left me Ellie. 2 weeks after the divorce was final, she took half of everything I had left and moved to Florida with another man. So that was it. David wasn't here because he missed me or because he'd realized what he'd lost. He was here because his young girlfriend had taken him for everything he was worth. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, surprised to find that I meant it. But it doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything. David stepped closer, ignoring James's presence entirely. We can start over, Ellie. We can get remarried. Go back to the way things were. The way things were, I repeated. David, I sold my business to save your life. I sold our house. I gave up everything for you. And the moment you got better, you threw me away like garbage. I was wrong. You were selfish, I interrupted. And cruel. And you left me with nothing. Do you know where I've been living, a homeless shelter? Do you know what it's like to be 65 years old and have nowhere to go? David's face flushed. But look at you now. You've obviously landed on your feet. Found yourself a rich man to take care of you. The implication in his words, the casual assumption that I was some kind of gold digger, hit me like a physical blow. You don't know anything about my situation. I know you're not living in a shelter anymore. I know you're wearing clothes that cost more than most people make in a month. I know you've obviously moved on pretty quickly for a woman who claimed to love me. Claimed to love you? The words came out sharper than I intended. I gave you my entire life, David. I sacrificed my dreams, my security, my future for you. And you repaid me by abandoning me the moment it was convenient. People make mistakes, Ellie. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. James stepped forward, then his presence suddenly much more prominent. I think this conversation is over. David seemed to notice him for the first time. And who exactly are you? Someone who knows how to treat a good woman when he finds one, James replied calmly. David's face turned red. Ellie, you can't seriously be choosing this stranger over your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected. And I'm not choosing anyone. I'm choosing myself for the first time in 42 years. You'll regret this, David said, his voice turning ugly. You're 65 years old, Ellie. How long do you think this is going to last? What happens when he gets tired of you? When he realizes you're just a broke old woman with nothing to offer? That's enough. James's voice carried an authority that made even David step back. But the damage was done. David's words had hit their target, awakening every insecurity I'd been trying to suppress. I was 65. I was a homeless woman who'd been rescued by a wealthy man 30 years younger than me. Maybe David was right. Maybe this was just temporary charity. I think you should leave now, I told David quietly. He studied my face for a long moment, perhaps hoping to see some sign that his words had worked, that I was wavering. When he didn't find what he was looking for, his expression hardened. Fine, but don't come crawling back to me when this fantasy ends, Ellie. I won't be there. He walked back to his car, a rusted Honda that looked even more pathetic next to the Rolls-Royce and the security vehicles. As his taillights disappeared down the drive, I stood there feeling like I'd been hollowed out inside. Are you all right? James asked gently. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was. You heard what he said. I'm 65 years old, James. Sophie needs someone young, energetic. Someone who can keep up with her. Sophie needs someone who cares about her, James said firmly. Age has nothing to do with that. But as we drove back to the house, I couldn't shake David's words. What happens when he gets tired of you? It was a question I didn't have an answer for. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard David's voice. What happens when he gets tired of you? By dawn, I had made my decision. I would thank James for his kindness, say goodbye to Sophie, and return to the shelter where I belonged. But Sophie had other plans. You can't leave, she announced when I joined her for breakfast in the sunny morning room overlooking the gardens. We haven't had our tea party yet. Sweetheart, I think it's time for me to go. Your daddy is here now. You're safe. Sophie's face crumpled. But I don't want you to go. You're my guardian angel. Before I could respond, James appeared in the doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept much either. Good morning. he said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. I hope you slept well. I did, thank you. The lie came easily. I was just telling Sophie that I should be going today. Daddy, tell her she can't leave. Sophie pleaded, tears starting to form in her eyes. James sat down at the table, accepting the cup of coffee Elizabeth had poured for him. Actually, Eleanor, there's something we need to discuss before you make any decisions. What do you mean? I had a long conversation with Agent Torres last night. The investigation into Sophie's kidnapping has revealed some disturbing information. My blood went cold. What kind of information? The men who took Sophie weren't just after money or business secrets. They were specifically targeting my family because of certain government contracts my company holds, contracts that involve national security. Sophie had stopped crying and was listening with wide eyes. This was clearly news to her, too. What does that have to do with me? You've been seen with Sophie. There are photographs of you together during those 3 days taken by the kidnappers' associates before they were arrested. As far as anyone watching knows, you're important to my family now. The implications hit me like a truck. You're saying I'm in danger. I'm saying that leaving now, going back to the shelter, or trying to resume your old life would be extremely dangerous. These people don't forgive, and they don't forget. I felt the walls closing in around me. So what are you suggesting that I hide here forever? I'm suggesting that the job offer I made yesterday wasn't just a kindness. It was also the safest option for everyone involved. Sophie reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Please stay, Miss Eleanor. I'll be really good. I promise. We can have tea parties every day. I looked at this beautiful child who had already lost her mother and had nearly been lost herself and felt my resolve wavering. I need some time to think. James nodded. Of course. But while you're thinking, let me show you something. He led me to a small office off the main library. Inside were files, photographs, and documents spread across a desk. This is the investigation, James explained. The kidnapping wasn't a random crime. It was orchestrated by a syndicate with ties to foreign governments. They wanted access to defensive AI systems my company is developing. Systems that could protect against cyber warfare, detect threats before they happen. He showed me photographs of the men who'd taken Sophie. Professional criminals with long records. Most of them are in custody now, but not all. And the people who hired them, the real power behind this, they're still out there. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to understand that this isn't just about Sophie needing a companion or me feeling grateful for what you did. This is about keeping you safe. And yes, it's also about giving Sophie the stability she needs. But Eleanor, he turned to face me directly. It's more than that. In 3 days with you, Sophie smiled more than she had in 3 months. She laughed. She felt safe enough to be a child again. You gave her something I haven't been able to give her. What's that? A mother's love. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I can't replace her real mother. I'm not asking you to replace anyone. I'm asking you to be yourself, to be the woman who spent her last $20 on a frightened child, to be the person who made Sophie feel safe when her whole world was falling apart. He pulled out another document. This is a revised contract, $150,000 per year plus full benefits. But there's more. If you agree to stay for at least 1 year, I'll also set up a trust fund in your name. $250,000, the exact amount you spent saving your ex-husband's life. It will be yours, no strings attached. You can leave after a year and have financial security for the rest of your life. I stared at the numbers, unable to process them. Why would you do that? Because you deserve it. Because you gave everything to save someone who didn't deserve it. And I want to give you something back. But also because I want you to stay, because you want to, not because you have to. A year from now, if you want to leave, you'll have the means to start fresh anywhere you want. It was the most generous offer I'd ever received, and the most terrifying. I need to think about this, I whispered. Take all the time you need. I spent the rest of the morning walking the gardens trying to clear my head. Part of me wanted to run, to go back to the shelter, back to the life I understood, even if it was hard. This world of mansions and security teams and government conspiracies felt too big, too complicated, too far from anything I knew. But another part of me, The part that had held Sophie through her nightmares, that had seen her smile when she felt safe, that part couldn't walk away. I found Sophie in the stables brushing a gentle mare named Moonlight. "She's my favorite," Sophie explained. "Mommy used to bring me here every day. After she died, I stopped coming, but this morning I wanted to show you. She's beautiful. Miss Eleanor, are you going to stay?" I knelt down beside her, looking into those trusting brown eyes. "Sophie, if I stay, I need you to understand something. I'm not your mommy. I could never replace her." "I know," Sophie said seriously, "but maybe you could be like a Grandma Ellie." The simplicity of it took my breath away. Not a replacement, just a different kind of love. "I think I'd like that very much." Sophie's face lit up. "So you'll stay?" I thought about David's words, about being 65 and having nothing to offer, about being tired and scared and unsure. But I also thought about Sophie's hand in mine during the storm, about James's quiet respect and genuine gratitude, about the possibility of having a family again, even if it looked nothing like the one I'd lost. "Yes," I said before I could change my mind. "Yes, I'll stay." Sophie threw her arms around me with a squeal of delight that probably scared the horses. And for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: hope. End of Part 3, 6,000 words. Bang. The epilogue. 2 years later, I stood in the garden where Sophie and I had shared our first tea party, watching her chase butterflies among the roses. At 10 years old, she had grown taller, more confident, but she still insisted on our daily tea time together. The transformation in both our lives had been remarkable. Nathan had come to me 6 months after I moved in, broken and ashamed. His wife, Emma, had nearly lost their baby due to complications, and he'd realized what really mattered. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. He brought his family to visit once a month, and his son, my grandson, called me Grandma Ellie, just like Sophie did. David had tried to contact me twice more, both times asking for money. I'd said no both times. I heard through Nathan that he'd moved to a retirement community in Arizona, living on his Social Security. I felt pity for him, but no regret. James had been true to every promise. The trust fund was established. My salary was deposited on time every month. But more than that, he'd welcomed me into his family in ways I never expected. We'd become partners in raising Sophie, making decisions together, supporting each other. The legal guardianship papers were signed last month. If anything happened to James, Sophie would be mine to raise. It was official, legal, real. "Grandma Ellie," Sophie called from across the garden. "Come see the blue butterfly is back." I made my way over to where she crouched beside the lavender bushes, watching a magnificent blue morpho butterfly rest on the purple flowers. "She only comes here when she knows it's safe," Sophie said softly. "Just like you did." The observation was unexpectedly wise. 2 years ago, I'd been a broken woman with nothing left to lose. I'd spent my last money on a frightened child and thought I was making the final gesture of a failed life. But that gesture had led to this: a family that cherished me, a home where I was valued, a future full of love and purpose. Sometimes guardian angels come to save themselves as much as the people they protect. And sometimes the very act of giving everything away is what finally brings you everything you never knew you needed. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving 2 other stories on the final screen that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the end. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached.